After my recent trip to Mazatlan, the #1 question you guys asked me was, how does it compare to Puerto Vallarta? I visited Vallarta quite a few times, and if you've seen any of my videos, you know it's one of my absolute favorite cities. But after my trip to Mazatlan, I think it might be a new contender at the top of my favorites list. I'm covering a lot in this video, so it's going to be comprehensive. But there were a few things that definitely surprised me when I was comparing the two, so I've put the timestamps down below if you want to jump around to what interests you. Let's get started. First, let's compare the overall vibe and feel of each city. Mazatlan is a big city, double the size and population of Puerto Vallarta. Yet somehow it feels a little sleepier in comparison. There's fewer crowds, it's very laid back, it's charming, and it's full of history and that authentic Mexico feel. While it definitely attracts tourists, overall it just feels a little more real. While Vallarta started out as a sleepy fishing village, it's since blossomed into one of the most popular tourism regions in Mexico. And for good reason. It's a small, bustling city, it's surrounded by beautiful scenery, with many lively neighborhoods, amazing cuisine and street food, there's cobblestone streets, tons of beaches, and lots of surrounding communities that are definitely worth a visit. I would say Mazatlan has more of a working city feel first, and a tourist city second. This isn't a bad thing though. Few businesses actually close down during the summer or low season, whereas since many areas in Vallarta are highly tourism focused, many more businesses shut down for a couple of months. So if you're visiting in the low season or in the summer, Mazatlan is probably the spot for you. This also might be something to think about if you're considering moving to Mexico. A lot of people will probably say Mazatlan is the better choice for living, whereas PV is the better choice for vacationing. Both cities have a historic downtown area where it really feels like you're stepping back in time to old Mexico. The historic downtown in Mazatlan centers around Plaza Machado. It's full of beautifully restored neoclassical buildings. It's undergone a dramatic restoration in the last few years, and it's absolutely breathtaking. The closest comparison in Vallarta would be the Zona Romantica, which has its own type of charm. There's narrow cobblestone streets, red tile roofs, and whitewashed brick houses. This neighborhood has a high concentration of bars, restaurants, and shops, and it's a lot livelier, especially when it comes to nightlife. For accommodation choices, you'll find large all-inclusive resorts, beach hotels, smaller boutique hotels, Airbnbs, budget properties, and hostels in both cities. You'll just have a lot more choices in Vallarta. However, prices are generally lower across the board in Mazatlan when it comes to accommodations. Both cities have a great mix of authentic accommodations and boutique hotels though. So if you plan to venture out of your room and explore the city, either spot would be great. If you want more choices for all-inclusive resorts, Vallarta is probably the winner here. Check the video description and the comments for links to my videos and blog posts about where to stay in Vallarta and Mazatlan if you need some help deciding. Moving on to beaches. I found the beaches to be pretty similar in both cities, with Puerto Vallarta having a slight edge. In both Mazatlan and Vallarta, the beaches have warm golden sand. It's a little bit grainy and a little bit gritty, but still definitely soft. In Mazatlan, there's miles of continuous beaches, including one stretch of beach that's over 3 miles long. I did find that the beaches were a little narrow, but they were never crowded, so lots of room for long walks. There is a great beach area called Stone Island, which is massive, and it's got shallow, calm water with dozens of beach bars and restaurants. Vallarta, on the other hand, doesn't have as long of a stretch of beach, but it does have a variety of fantastic small bays and coves and inlets, and they all have calm water, and they're perfect for swimming. They're surrounded by mountains and lush tropical views. In Vallarta proper, the beaches definitely get crowded on weekends and especially on holidays. The advantage with Vallarta though is heading to the surrounding areas. You can go either south of the city or to the north. One area that's my favorite is Nuevo Vallarta into Bucerías. This is where you'll find over 5 miles of soft, light-colored sand. And it's all interrupted, so you can walk the entire length. This brings me to the beach vendors, which there are lots of in both cities. Now, for most beach vendors, this is their livelihood, and I do enjoy browsing to see what they're selling. So no shade here whatsoever to the vendors. But if you've ever been to Vallarta, you know they can be quite persistent and pretty constant. Mazatlan, though, was completely different. The vendors were less prevalent, and as soon as I would say no gracias, they wouldn't push any further and be on their way. When it comes to things to do and attractions and day trips, I would probably put Vallarta as the overall winner, but I would say it only wins if you're planning to go for an extended stay or you're doing multiple trips. Both Mazatlan and Vallarta have plenty of things to see and do to keep you busy for at least a week. If you're staying longer and want a variety of things to do, have more options, I would say head to Vallarta. Mazatlan has great sport fishing and golf courses. There's also a brand new state-of-the-art aquarium that recently opened. It's one of the largest in Latin America. And they have a professional baseball team there that plays in a brand new stadium. Tickets are affordable, the stadium food is fun, and the overall experience is just a great time. In Vallarta, you can do snorkeling, hiking, zip lines, boat tours, all your classic type of tours, as well as fishing and golfing. But when it comes to day trips and excursions, I found there were way more day trip options and excursions to take from Puerto Vallarta compared to Mazatlan. There are so many surrounding small towns, beach communities, and villages like Bucerías, Sayulita, San Sebastián del Oeste, and Yelapa, for example. Some of my favorite day trips and excursions from Vallarta include visiting the natural hot springs, the Rhythms of the Night excursion, a day in Bucerías or Sayulita, the Yelapa waterfall, the botanical gardens, and of course, tequila tours. I've got a video series on day trips from Vallarta for more information or a lot of ideas in my day trips guide to unique day trips from Vallarta on my travel blog. Next, we have the Malecon. These are the oceanfront boardwalks that are always a favorite place to gather if you spend any time in either city. In Vallarta, it's about a mile long. It's lively, lined with bars, restaurants, and shops. There's public art, pop-up markets, vendors, street performers, and in the evening, it transforms into a little night market. You really could spend an entire day roaming up and down the Malecon, taking in the views, visiting the shops and markets, trying all the amazing restaurants and tequila shots, and catching the sunset. Mazatlan also has a gorgeous Malecon. It's one of the longest in the world, coming in at about 13 miles long. It's one long continuous boardwalk from the Golden Zone, which is a fun touristy area, all the way down to the historic downtown. Mazatlan is a large city and it's quite spread out. So I love that the Malecon basically connects all the main tourist neighborhoods in the city along the coast. In the evenings, people definitely gather and hang out and watch the sunsets, and it's really fun to just cruise up and down in the Pullmanías. In my opinion, both Malecons are equally as beautiful and serve their purpose in each city, so this one's a tie. Let's talk transportation and getting around. Most of you will probably be flying into either of these cities. One of my favorite things about visiting Vallarta is the ease of getting into the city from the airport. It's pretty much right in town, and it's quick to get out via taxi or Uber. Traffic does get busy, but at least you're immediately in the city when you're there. On the other hand, Mazatlan's airport is small and easy to navigate, but you must take an airport taxi or commercial transportation. There's no Ubers to the airport, and it's a minimum 30-minute ride into the city, which is more akin to most other tourist cities in Mexico. Once you're in either city though, they're both quite easy to navigate and get around. There's lots of public buses available, taxis, and plenty of Ubers. As far as walkability goes, both cities are easy to get around and you really don't need a car if you don't want one. Mazatlan is larger and more spread out, so it does take longer to walk between areas. However, it was generally pretty flat when compared to Vallarta, which has a lot of hills and some rough cobblestone streets, but it's not really anything you can't navigate. In making this video, I wanted to touch on cleanliness. I wouldn't normally put this category in, but this was something I noticed about Mazatlan. All the streets were very clean, well kept, and free of garbage. Yes, I am talking about the main tourist areas. Some people might say Mazatlan is a little rough around the edges, but if you've been to Vallarta in Centro and the Romantic Zone, you know the garbage gets piled up on the street corners, and this just wasn't really a thing in Mazatlan. As far as language goes, English is widely spoken in both cities, but when comparing them overall, there was a little less English in Mazatlan, especially down in the Centro Historico area. In the Golden Zone, most of the hospitality staff spoke English. Chris and I try to speak Spanish as much as possible when we travel to Mexico, and what I noticed and appreciated in Mazatlan was that when we did speak Spanish to the locals, they would speak back in Spanish until we couldn't understand and had to switch to English. Whereas mostly in Vallarta, locals would ask if we would prefer them to speak in Spanish or English. Now, don't get me wrong, this is polite and very courteous, but since I'm trying to get better at speaking Spanish, I really appreciated this about Mazatlan. Now, for one of the best parts about going on vacation, especially to Mexico, the food. This one is hard. I found both cities had great food. You'll find everything from affordable but delicious street food to high-end restaurants in both cities. But Vallarta definitely has a lot more restaurants overall and more variety to choose from. Albeit, many restaurants in the tourist areas of Vallarta are quite expensive and are primarily for tourists. Chris and I like to travel more modestly to keep things affordable, so we don't tend to visit the higher-end restaurants or places where we're paying over $25 a plate, so I won't comment on those types of places in this video. Conversely, many of the restaurants in the touristy areas in Mazatlan are more affordable. There's a bigger variety of places that have more of a local flavor compared to a tourist flavor. The street food is always our go-to, and while both cities have an amazing street food scene, I have to hand this one to Vallarta because the tacos al pastor are hands down the best in Vallarta. But we still found great options in Mazatlan, like the choriado taco, which is unique to this part of the country. But I am giving the seafood award to Mazatlan for two reasons. One is because it was more affordable, so we ate a lot more seafood than in Vallarta. And secondly, because of the bring your own seafood culture here, where you visit the shrimp market, pick out your shrimp or other seafood, and then you bring it to a restaurant of your choice and have it cooked any way you want for a small fee. Half a kilo is a lot.
Yeah, dude.
Okay, let's go pick how we want it cooked across the street. Overall, when it comes to cost and prices, we found Mazatlan to be about 30% less expensive compared to Vallarta. This was for food, accommodations, and transportations. I would say though that tours and excursions were comparable in prices. So if you're on a budget, Mazatlan is the winner here. Being on the same coast and under 300 miles apart, the weather is pretty similar in both cities, especially if you're visiting in the winter months, when most tourists visit, which is between November and April. You can expect average daily highs ranging from 80 to 93 Fahrenheit, or about 27 to 34 Celsius. Mazatlan has a semi-tropical climate, whereas Puerto Vallarta is considered tropical. So you're gonna notice that Vallarta is more lush and does get more rain than Mazatlan during the rainy season. Okay, let's talk safety. Both cities are very safe for tourists, and there's really no need to worry. Stick to the main tourist areas and you'll be just fine. Yes, petty crime can happen in both cities, so you should use common sense like you would at home. Things like don't walk alone at night along dark streets and alleyways, don't wear flashy jewelry or carry large amounts of cash, don't get blackout intoxicated, all that type of stuff. And please don't come at me in the comments about cartel BS. Just don't buy or sell drugs or go looking for trouble in Mexico and you'll be okay. There's a risk to visiting anywhere in the world. I recently wrote a piece about my thoughts on safety in Mazatlan, and I might make a video about it in the future, so there's a link to it in my travel blog if you're interested in reading more about that. Now, which city is right for you? If you want a lush tropical setting surrounded by mountains and beaches with lots of activities, outdoor excursions, and all kinds of cuisine options, Vallarta is probably the best pick for you. I would choose Mazatlan if you want a city that has less of a touristy feel, especially if you're interested in a quiet downtown area full of history and local culture. If you want to walk for miles along uncrowded beaches or go walking or jogging for miles along the ocean, Mazatlan is your place. As far as demographics, there are lots of Americans and Canadians in both cities, but Vallarta definitely attracts all ages, especially younger adults. Whereas Mazatlan, being calm and less busy and laid back, I would say it attracts more people over the age of 50. If it's your very first time going to Mexico and you're choosing between either of these places, I would probably suggest choosing Vallarta. It's visually stunning, the tourist infrastructure is a little better set up, and English is more widely spoken. But if you're someone who has frequented Vallarta a lot in recent years and are finding it's becoming a little too busy and maybe a little too touristy for you, I think you would definitely love Mazatlan. Now, if you've made it to this part of the video, first of all, thank you so much. I wanted to mention a couple of caveats here. Since this is a travel and tourism channel, the information in this video is more geared towards people traveling for vacation and leisure purposes. For that reason, we stick to the main tourist areas of both of these cities, and we didn't really stray into the local neighborhoods where you might have different experiences and maybe find that things are much more inexpensive, especially regarding food and places to stay. Along similar lines, I didn't really look into real estate or expat living considerations. But for that, I recommend you check out the Mexico Relocation Guide, which I linked linked in the video description below, as well as the YouTube channel of the same name. That's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments which city best suits your vibe and which one you think is better suited for you. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.